Hi guys, welcome back to Anita Crochets. My name is Anita and we have this little thigh-high slit mini skirt. That's what we are going to be making, but my intention for this tutorial is not to make the skirt. My intention rather is to teach you how to work your increments around the hip area, because when I asked you guys in an engagement post recently and I asked you guys what you would love to see on my channel, I got 2 people asking for the same thing, and they're stuck about how to make the right size for themselves, more so when it comes to skirts and also increments around the hip area. And this tutorial is meant for exactly that. Now, the written pattern for this skirt is going to be on my online shops. Also, the tutorial and written pattern for the top in this video is already on my channel, and the written pattern on my online shops, right? So let's get into the tutorial. I am working with chunky yarn. It is Robin 100% acrylic, and this is 3-ply. Guys, sometimes where you make the mistake and have results that don't match mine is because you're probably working with a different size of yarn, and then you find that maybe you are working with size 3 yarn and the result is slightly smaller because the size of yarn also matters. This is size 4 yarn. It is chunky. It is 3-ply, all right? And it is 100% acrylic. Now, once we know that we have the right size of yarn that we are both working with, if we don't have, then you have to follow exactly what I'm going to explain in the tutorial so that we make sure that we have the same results even when we are working with different yarn sizes. Now, to start off, you are going to take your waist measurements, your high waist measurements, all right? And your foundation chains should be equivalent to your high waist measurements. In this sense, I mean that when you work your foundation chains, do not stretch the cord. Do not stretch the cord, but rather work foundation chains that match your high waist measurements. For example, if your high waist is 28 or 30, make sure that when you work your foundation chains and put the cord onto your tape measure, it meets 30 inches, all right? Now, once you have a cord that can go around your waist without being stretched, because the reason as to why some of you end up with work that is slightly tight is because you probably stretched out your cord to meet those measurements, and you forgot that when the skirt is going to be passed over your arms and your shoulders, it needs more expansion, all right? So for me, I work a cord that is not stretched, but rather it is equivalent to my waist measurement, so that when I stretch it and I'm passing it over my shoulders, that's when the stretch comes in. And then that stretch is enough room to go through my shoulders and now go down and still snatch my waist, okay? So once you have the chains, the foundation chains that are equivalent to the measurements I have provided, you are now going to get into the first chain stitch the first chain stitch that started the cord and work a slip stitch. Now here, you need to make sure that you do not turn your cord, okay? Do not turn your cord or twist it in any way. Make sure that it is flat, and now you work a slip stitch into the very first chain stitch, all right? And now once we have a ring from our cord, right, just like this. Now to start our very first row, we are going to chain 2. And into this very first chain stitch, we are going to work 1/2 double crochet, right? And now we are going to work 1/2 double crochet into every chain stitch all the way around until you come to the end of your row. Now the number of half double crochets that you should be equivalent to the number of foundation chains that you worked. So work your 1/2 double crochet into every stitch all the way around, right, until you come to the end of your row. And that's where I'm going to meet you guys and then show you how to end your row or close your row. Then we can get on to the next row. So let me meet you guys here. And here we are. I have worked all my half double crochets as I should. And since I'm at the end of the row, I'm going to get my hook and insert it into the second chain stitch of the 2 chains that started the row and work a slip stitch. Now remember that those 2 chains are just turning chains and they're not a stitch. I don't count them as a stitch. If you want to, count them, but I don't count them as a stitch. So once again, you're going to chain 2, turn your work, and into the very first stitch, you're going to work 1 half double crochet. And then you will work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way around, just like we did previously, right? Work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way around until you come to the end of your row, and that's where I'm going to meet you. Then still show you how to end your row so that you have mastered this, and then I'll explain something before we go forward with the tutorial. Now, here I am at the end of my row, so I'm going to get into the second chain stitch of the 2 chains that started the row, and I'll work a slip stitch just like that. So this is how my work looks like, and for the next row, it's not going to be any different. It is a chain 2, turn your work. Remember to turn your work every time, or else your seam line will be diagonal. So to keep the seam line straight and have it at the center of our back and it is straight, you need to remember that when working in rounds, you turn your work. So yes, chain 2, turn your work, work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way around, right, until you come to the end of your tutorial, and work a slip stitch into the very first stitch. So you do this repeatedly for the next 3 rows so that we have a total of 6 rows. All right, so let me meet you guys once you have 6 rows, and then I'll meet you there and show you what to do. So here we are. I have my 6 rows complete. My work looks small. I am working this for size small. Also, the stitch I am working with gives us a great thickness and a good stretch, right? The half double crochet, if you realize, it gives us that good stretch and then a great thickness. Unlike the double crochet kind of gives off work that is kind of light, if you realize. So what's going to happen here, as you can see, I have marked where I need to have my increments for the hip area. So what happens is you count all the number of stitches you have on your previous row. For example, I have 80, and you divide 80 by 4, right? So when you divide 80 by 4, you get 20. So from here up to there is 20 stitches, so I marked that. And then from here towards the left is 20 stitches as well, and I marked that. Why is I want my seam line where I have been ending my rows to be at the center of my back. I don't want it on the sides, not on the front, not anywhere, but I want it at the back, at the center of my back. That's why I'm counting from where I ended my row towards the left, and again from where I ended my row towards the right. Now that's what you do. If you have like 120 stitches, get 120, divide it by 4. If the number is not divisible by 4, for example, you have 90 stitches, dividing by 4, you get something like 20 point or 20 something point. Now that point is that extra stitch. For example, if you got 20.5, that means you're going to mark the 21st stitch. If you got 23.2 or I don't know, it should be 0.5 or something. Now that means you're going to mark the 24th, not the 23rd stitch. So you count from where you ended your row and count towards the left and mark that stitch, and then count from where you ended your row, count towards the right and mark that stitch. Okay, now to get started with this next row is we're going to chain 2, turn our work, and work 1 half double crochet into every stitch until we get to the marked stitch. Guys, my speech is trying to catch up with my actions, so if you feel like I am moving fast and my speech is slow, I'm going to catch up definitely. And here it is. I have worked my half double crochets until the marked stitch. Now what's going to happen with the marked stitch is I'm going to take out my stitch markers and put them aside. Into that marked stitch, I'm going to work 2 half double crochets all in the very same stitch. Now what happens with having bumpy puffy forming forms. I don't know even how to call them. But in the comment, someone said that, oh, after you work your 2 half double crochets into what was the marked stitch, you're going to work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way around until you get to the marked stitch on the other end, right there. That's where I'm going to meet you then, show you what to do. Now, what happens is, what makes you get those bumpy forming? Sometimes it's either you worked too many stitches into the very same stitch for your increase, or you overworked so many rows of an increase before you had a series of no increments in between. We are going to get into that while we get into the tutorial. Now, when you get into the marked stitch on the other side, still you're going to do the very same thing. Take out your stitch marker and work 2 half double crochets all into that very same stitch. And then after that, you're going to work 1 half double crochet into every stitch until you come to the end of your row. And once at the end of your row, you are going to work a slip stitch into the second chain stitch of the 2 chains that started the previous row. Yes, I'm still explaining why you get those, I don't know, not great formings on your hip area. When you work so many rows of an increase, before you have a row of no increase, in between those rows of an increase, you find that you're going to get that on your hip area, right? Now, just like you look at our hips, our body kind of, forms gradually. Like from the waist, it's a gradual increase. And then you find that we get wider around the hip area. It's not like from the waist, someone just goes, woof, and then they have huge hips, like just from the waist. No, it's kind of gradual. Yes, I know some people have quite huge hips, yes, but still, the forming is kind of gradual. That's how also your increase for your skirts around the hip area should be. Okay. Now for this next row, chain 2, you will turn your work, but first before that, I usually just, to mark where my hip area is going to be after I've worked 1 row of an increase, I'll just get into the 2 double crochets I worked. I don't have to count again divide, no, I just get into those 2 double crochets just like you can see right here, those 2 right there, I marked in between them. So it is easier like that to, mark where exactly your next increase is going to go, right? So for the next row still, we are going to have an increase around the hip area. So what we will do is we shall chain 2, turn our work 1 half double crochet into every stitch until the marked stitch once again. So what we are doing is exactly what we did previously, no difference at all. But now here, as you can see, when I get to the marked stitch, I am going to work 2 half double crochets into that very same stitch, which is the marked stitch, right? I'll take out the stitch marker because I'm not going to be working an increase on the next row. So I'll take it out. And now after this, I'm going to work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way around until I get to the marked stitch on the other end, right? And that's where I'm going to meet you guys. Guys, I'm trying to explain so many things all in this same tutorial because as I said, my intention was not to make a skirt tutorial, but my intention is to clearly explain everything as it should so that it helps you on your next skirt projects. Now, when you get to the marked stitch on the other end, you're going to do the very same thing. Take out your stitch marker and work 2 half double crochets all in that very same stitch. Once you have your 2 half double crochets in there, you're now going to continue with 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way until the end of the row, and then work a slip stitch into the second chain stitch of the 2 chains that started the row, right? So this means we have 2 rows of an increase. Now with my previous tutorials, I have been explaining this thing several times and I still get comments of people asking, what do you mean by 2 rows of an increase and what do you mean by normal rows? Once again, we have had 2 rows of an increase. This means that in these 2 rows, we have managed to work an increase on both our left and right hip, like you have seen, okay? because I have been marking where my left hip has to go and where my right hip has to go. And those 2 rows in which I have worked an increase for the left and right hip, those are the ones I call rows of an increase, right? Because they had an increment in there. Now, what I call a normal row is a row I worked without working any increments whatsoever. So that means on this row, I only worked 1 stitch into every stitch until the end of the row. I hope this is now clear. Now, like you can see that we are starting to get some little bit of increase. Sometimes it doesn't have to be like a visible increase, because when you put it on, it's going to snatch and give that form, right? And if you want to increase until you see a visible increase, you may go overhead, and sometimes you're working with a stitch that actually gives an increase already. The half double crochet stitch gives an increase, like it's easy to expand. Yeah. So now for this row, we do not intend to work any increases whatsoever. So we chain 2, turn our work, and work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way around until we come to the end of our row, and work a slip stitch into the chain 2 that started the row. Now this is why I call it the normal row. Like, it is so normal, no change of stitches, no whatsoever. That's why I call it the normal row. So if I continue to use rows of an increase and normal row, please understand that this is where it comes from, right? Now, my purpose for working a normal row, it is very good that once you work a few rows of an increase, work a normal row in between to dilute the expansion. You cannot have conch juice. Like, you can I'm trying to find the most basic language to use so that we clearly understand this expanding thing, this expansion thing, or this increment thing around our hip area. So yes, you cannot have conch juice and increase all the way through, or else you're going to have bumpy formings on, the side of your hips. So you need to dilute the increments. So to dilute the increments, you are going to work a row or 2 rows of just normal stitches, no increase whatsoever. Now, like you can see, I have worked my normal row, and now I am looking for my stitch that I'm going to mark for my left hip. So usually for me, I just look through and see which stitch corresponds the previous increase, and I mark that. Which stitch corresponds to the previous increase, even on the left side, and then I mark that. But if you want to be as accurate, my eyes know where to put what. So if you want to be as accurate, please count your work once again, count your stitches, divide the number by 4, and count from where we previously ended our row, count to the left and mark that number of stitches. And also once again, from where we ended our row towards the right, you count and mark those number of stitches. Now once you have that, yes, we are now going to get back to increasing once again. So we chain 2, turn our work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way until the marked stitch, right? Until the marked stitch. Yes, so this is what I needed to explain to you guys. The best way to, oh God, I don't know which word to use, but yes, the best way is you need to have a few rows of an increase and then a row or 2 without an increase whatsoever. A row or 2. Now here, like you can see, I have worked my 2 rows of an increase and now normal row, and then now we are back to increasing once again because I need to get this thing wider and wider until I feel like it can stretch out to meet my hip area, my hip measurements. So once you get to your marked stitch, you're going to work 2 half double crochets all into this very same stitch, and then take out your stitch marker and just place it into the 2 half double crochets in between the 2 half double crochets, because even the next row is going to be of an increase. So I just get it and place it in between the 2 half double crochets I just worked so that it is easier for me. I don't have to count again and then divide. Yes, sometimes crochet really has some good mathematics. You need to have your brain ready to deal with that. And now you're going to work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way around until you get to the marked stitch on the other side. And that's where I'm going to meet you guys, then show you what to do right there. So let me meet you guys there. Now here we are. I'm going to take out my stitch marker, and then I'm going to work 2 half double crochets into this very same stitch. And I'll get my stitch marker and put it right in between those 2 half double crochets, because I'm also going to have an increase for the next row. Right, and then I'm going to work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way until the end of the row, and I'll work a slip stitch into the second chain stitch of the 2 chains that started the row. So I'll meet you at the end of your row and show you what to do. So we are here. This is how my work looks like, and we are starting to see a visible kind of stretch. Right here, as you can see, we are going to just work our 2 chains and work 2 half double crochets into the marked stitches. Then the rest of the stitches are going to have 1 half double crochet into them, and then you work a slip stitch. Now after you have this row of an increment, you are now just going to work a normal row. Now the normal row means that you are going to work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way around until the end of your row. Now this means we are having 2 rows of an increase and then 1 normal row after. So this means you are going to chain 2 and work 1 half double crochet into every stitch until right here the marked stitch in there. You work 2 half double crochets, then continue with 1 half double crochet into the next marked stitch is 2 half double crochets, and then 1 half double crochet until the end of the row. Now that means we are going to have our second row of an increase. Now after that, you're just going to work 1 half double crochet into every stitch until the end of your row, and then have 1 row of an increase. Sorry, 1 normal row, no increase whatsoever, right? After that, you have to have 2 rows of an increase, whereby you have an increase on your left and right hip, and for 2 rows, right? And after those 2 rows of an increase, you have 1 normal row, no increase whatsoever. And you do this repeatedly until you have a project that can stretch out to meet your hip area. It needs to be in position to stretch out to meet your hip area. Now, why do we get to stretch it out when we get to the hip area? Because we want it to snatch. When you make your hip area and make sure that it actually just is equivalent to your hip measurements, then crochet kind of stretches out over time when you keep putting on something, when you keep putting it on and all that. The stitches, I think, loosen out just slightly, so you'll find that it is no longer snatching. Now this is why we do not make something that is equivalent to your hip area, but rather we make an increase until it can stretch out to meet your hip measurements. I hope now I am very clear. Now once you have that, you have worked your increments, worked two rows of an increase followed by 1 normal row. Until you have that, you are now going to chain 2, turn your work, and now work 1 half double crochet into every stitch all the way around until the end of your row. And this is what you repeat and repeat, because now we no longer need increments, but rather we need length. All right, so you work this. Since I'm working something with a slit, I'm going to work this until the length I feel comfortable to have my slit at, right? So once you have your increments, work this until you have the length that we need, where you feel comfortable your slit needs to start from. That's where I'm going to meet you guys and show you what to do. I'll tell you the number of rows I have worked before that, then we'll see how to work our slit. So guys, here is my work, right? I have around 26 rows from my waist area going down, right? So yes, that's what I have, and that's the length I am confident my skirt needs to have, because I intend to have something little, like a little mini skirt. That's why it's kind of skimpy. Yes, but once you have the length that you need for your project, before you now start working the slit area, we are now going to cut our yarn from where we ended, because we are no longer going to start from that point. We are now going to cut our yarn. Now once you cut your yarn, you're just going to find a point where you feel you need your slit. Some of you may want the slit in front at the center of the front. I want it on the sides, that's why I put it a few stitches from the center of my front, right? That's why I put it right there. So you're just going to find that point, and once you find it, you mark it. And now we are going to get our hook and insert our, hook into that stitch, and we are going to chain 2 and then work 1/2 double crochet into that very same stitch right there. Then we shall work 1/2 double crochet into every stitch all the way around. Right, work your 1/2 double crochet into every stitch. Now the stitch where your slit has to be, it should be a couple of stitches away from the stitch that had your hip area, right? So that it is centered at the center of your right or left leg, right? That's the intention. And there is no mathematics to it. You just have to be artistic and find that stitch and just mark that, right? Also, if you feel it's not perfectly placed, you still can turn your skirt around until the slit is like placed where you want it to be placed. So there is no mathematics or science there. Yeah, just do that. Now here we are going to work 1/2 double crochet into every stitch all the way around until the marked stitch. So we work our last 1/2 double crochet in there in the marked stitch, right? So let me let you guys do that, then meet you on the next row. Now once you have come to the end of your row and you have your 1/2 double crochet into the very first stitch, which was the marked stitch for our slit, like you can see, this is how it should look like. Now to create a slit is not working a slip stitch at the end of the row, because we need to keep that row open. Now once we have that, we are going to chain 2 and turn our work, and here we are going to work 1/2 double crochet into every stitch all the way around until the very last stitch, which was the first stitch that started the previous row. So you're just going to work 1/2 double crochet into every stitch until the end of the row, right? So this is how you work a slit. This is how you keep your slit open. Yeah, because the previous rows we have been working a slip stitch at the end of the row to close up the row, but now we don't need it to be closed. So we just work our stitches until the end of the row. And this is what you are going to do repeatedly. I kept checking because, I'm still learning to work with this tripod, so I keep checking whether I'm recording or not. Now, yes, you work your 1/2 double crochet into every stitch all the way around until the end of the row right there. And you do this again for the next row and again for the next row until you have the length that you need for your skirt. And there you have your skirt. I'm just going to get back and show you how to work your waistband. Then we shall call this the end of the tutorial. And we are here at the end of our row, right? I will cut my yarn and, secure my end just like that. Now I'm going to move on to my waistband and see how we can work this waistband. Now to work our waistband is we're going to get our hook and insert it into the very first chain stitch. We are working on the opposite side of our foundation chain, so we insert our hook into the very first chain stitch and pull through our loop, then chain 5. I think 5, yeah. Chain 5. Now the more chain stitches you work, the longer or wider your band is going to be. I don't look for a really exaggerated band. I just want something small for my waistline. So I chain 5, and into the second chain stitch from the hook I'm going to work 1 single crochet, and I'll continue to work 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way down until I have a total of 4 single crochets. Now I'm going to get into the next stitch on the opposite side of my foundation chains, and in there, right now, just look closely. When you see, we'll insert my hook into that next stitch on the foundation chains, on the opposite side of my foundation chains. I'll insert my hook in there and work a slip stitch. Now this slip stitch is to attach the chains that we just worked and the single crochets we just worked onto the waistline of our skirt, right? Then I'll get into the next stitch as well and work a slip stitch, right? Then I'm going to turn my work. This is the easiest way to have a band onto a waistline without having to just work the band separately and then hand sew it onto the waistline. I feel like that is double work. Now, once you have turned your work, you're going to get into the first single crochet stitch along the single crochets we just worked for our band and work a single crochet in there. Then you're going to work one single crochet into every stitch until the end of the row, and you should have a total of 4 single crochets. If you have more than that, then you probably worked a stitch into the slip stitch and thought it's also a single crochet stitch. So you should be very careful. That's why most of you like lose it when working these kind of bands, right? So you work your way up until the end of your row and should have 4 single crochets. Now once you have that, you are now going to chain 1, turn your work, right? And now you are going to work going down. So we work 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way down, and you should have a total of 4 single crochets, right? If this kind of confuses you, you're going to have to work this band separately and then hand sew it along your waistline, right? But if you really are eager to learn, just look closely at what I'm doing and learn something. Now what happens here is we get into the next stitch along the opposite side of our foundation chains and work a slip stitch. Then once again, work a slip stitch into the next stitch that's on the opposite side of our foundation chains. Now you will turn your work like that. And now we are now going to work into the very first single crochet. Right there, we work a single crochet into it and then continue working 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way up. I voice my tutorials usually in the morning, but sometimes I get birds, making noise in the background. I just hope you guys can hear me, and I don't intend to have this noise, yeah. But yes, this is what you do. Once you get up, you chain 1, turn your work your single crochets all the way down, work a slip stitch into the next stitch, and again work another slip stitch, then turn your work your single crochets going up. And that's what you do all the way around for every stitch all the way around until the end of your row. And I'm going to meet you at the end of your row to just show you how to connect the 2 ends together. Okay, yes, so this is how my work looks like. You can see my band really formed out well. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to work a few single crochets to close up my end of the band, or you can just get your yarn needle and hand stitch that together, and then now you have your skirt complete. I hope you guys like this tutorial. As you can see, I have no drawstring around my waist area. It is snatched, everything is snatched. So thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.